Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And it's been a relatively quiet 2041 to 2042 offseason for our Oakland A's. Haven't done anything at all in Major League free agency and don't necessarily anticipate that we will, unfortunately. We're still waiting as we sit here on January 14th for our catcher for the past 3.5 seasons, Jorge Mendoza, to sign a giant contract with somebody besides the Oakland A's, at which point we will presumably take a pretty significant hit to our fan interest. Mendoza has been outstanding for us over his 3.5 years in Oakland. Also spent parts of 4 seasons in Minnesota before we traded for him. But at this point, he's looking for around $38 million a year. And as good as he is, just not a contract we can possibly pay, given the financial limitations we have in Oakland with the 28th largest budget in all of baseball. Fortunately, we have the reigning Rookie of the Year, Jonah Richards, who played primarily at first base and DH for us last year, but is truly a natural catcher to hopefully take over for us as our backstop, and we hope provide even more offense and similar defense to the outstanding performance that we got from Mr. Mendoza over the years. But as interesting as it will be to see where Mendoza ultimately ends up, the focus of this episode is on the International Amateur Free Agent Signing Period, which is open today. Our Oakland A's have $5.7 million to spend, so as much money available to try to find some big-time prospects for our future as any team in baseball. And I think it's a really talented and really interesting list of prospects this year. Going to have some decisions to make that will be difficult, but hopefully it's a situation where we can't really make a wrong decision because there is some very strong talent this year. And also, interestingly, given that we usually have a wide diversity of opinions among the worldwide scouting department as to which way to go, there's actually a lot of consistency this year and a couple of players that really stand out compared to the rest of the pool, at least according to the worldwide scouting department. And I tend to agree with that assessment. The only starting pitcher or pitching prospect period who received significant support from the worldwide scouting department was Nelson Major Mercado. Both YME943 and Jarek Braxton like him, and there is definitely a lot to like about Mercado. Solid stamina, good at holding on runners, high adaptability and work ethic, and a potential 3 to 4 pitch arsenal that we think could result in well above average stuff, above average movement, and well above average control. The 17-year-old has ground ball tendencies, already throws in the low to mid 90s, and certainly think he could be a very interesting prospect. The demand of $2.8 million is high, but I would agree with YME943 and Jarek Braxton that Mercado is certainly the highest end prospect when we look at the whole package. Rogelio Vargas, just not a guy that I'm going to chase after given some of those negative personality traits, although if he reaches his full potential, could certainly still be an outstanding pitcher. Depending on how things develop, Jesus Centeno, the reliever, who's looking for only $1.1 million, could be a guy that we use to supplement our top selection, depending on who we end up with and how much we end up having to spend to hopefully get our number one choice on board. But if we're going to go big and early for any of the pitchers, I think Nelson Mercado is certainly the way that we would do it. Fortunately, in addition to at least one very high-end starting pitching prospect, there are some very interesting position players available. One that was mentioned in the comments that we didn't talk about last episode was Luis Arriola, who was pointed out for his very low demand and his pretty decent ceiling. Arriola is definitely a guy that I'd love to supplement in. He's durable, high leadership and intelligence, average speed, kind of a run-of-the-mill defensive corner outfielder, but think he could be a really good contact hitter who's kind of average at everything else. So not the most exciting prospect in the world, especially compared to some of the real high-end players that we've talked about. But I do agree completely that at $180,000 he is worth considering as a supplemental choice depending on where we end up going with our first and maybe second selection among some of the players that we're hoping to sign this year. And we talked last episode about the five-star players who are out there. And interestingly, it's kind of a two-horse race among the worldwide scouting department as to who is favored. And I can't really argue with the logic of the worldwide scouting department. The right fielder, Arturo Anguino, rumor mill, is by far the winner in terms of the popular vote as far as our scouts. DLL first base 14, Wyme 943, Avery Shayam, Dude, Jarek Braxton, Christian Wilson, Almost Scientific, and Kevin McDowell all have Anguino at the top of their list. Quaitime and Blade Staff have him second behind the next guy that we're going to talk about. And there's clearly a ton to like about Anguino. I think his contact is as good as almost anybody in baseball, and combining that with a potentially excellent eye makes you think he could be an on-base percentage machine. Potentially above average gap power to go with well above average speed, average home run power, kind of a average-ish corner outfielder, but high adaptability, work ethic, and intelligence, left-handed hitter, not even 17 years old yet, and certainly could see the Dominican outfielder becoming a very big-time player. And he's also only looking for $2.2 million, so in addition to kind of being the most popular choice, with his price tag being somewhat more reasonable than most of the other top-end prospects, it does get you dreaming a bit about maybe somehow being able to come out of this IAFA signing period with Anguino and another top prospect. The one that he's most often paired with the viewers is Santiago Valadez. He was the third choice of DLL first base 14, but both DLL first base 14, Not My Four Ply, and Dude all noted that Valadez, with his excellent home run power, another good personality, looks like he could be a solid defensive third baseman, and is average to above average, at least in terms of the ceilings for all of his other ratings. Also looking for $2.2 million, with $4.4 million in demands among those two players and $5.7 million to spend. There is certainly an argument to try to pair those two together and come out with two of the top handful of prospects in this entire IAFA period. But there is a clear number two behind Anguino as far as the worldwide scouting department, and it is not Valadez. It's the shortstop, Andres Esparza, Little Flying Dagger. Quaitime and Blade Staff both had him at the top of their lists, and Christian Wilson, DLL first base 14, Avery Shayam, and Wyme 943 all had him as number two on their list. Some positive personality traits with the high adaptability and work ethic. Looks like he could develop into a pretty solid defensive infielder, and he looks like he could be above average to well above average in all of the batting categories, although he certainly has a lot of work to do to develop his home run power at 6'1", 160 pounds. Esparza, though, looking for $3 million, is looking for as much money as anybody in this year's class. But in my opinion, I do agree with the worldwide scouting department that Anguino and Esparza are a cut above the rest of this class, and certainly the two most interesting prospects to me as far as the everyday players. And I mentioned earlier that Anguino is the strong number one against most of the worldwide, or by most of the worldwide scouting department, and that the pairing with Valadez and Anguino was mentioned by 3 of our experienced scouts in Dude, Not My 4-Ply, DLL First Base 14. Others did mention going bold and trying to pair Anguino with Esparza. Some also thought trying to pair Anguino with Mercado was also a very interesting path. And I think as I've thought about this over the past couple of days at this point, since the last episode, I thought that perhaps doing Valadez and Anguino, and I mentioned this at the end of the last episode, could put a $2.85 million offer to each of them from the start, which is almost 30% more than they're each looking for. I think could give me a pretty good shot to bring them both on board, which would be a huge class, getting either number 1 or worst case scenario 1A, depending on how you view Esparza, with another big time prospect in Valadez. But I think I'm going to push the envelope even a bit further, and we're going to try to get Anguino as well as Esparza and try to get the top 2 players, in our opinion, and actually overall in the opinion of the worldwide scouting department. I don't think we end up with both of them, but worst case scenario, we'll set ourselves up to get at least one of them, even if we have to spend every penny that we have to get one of them. And it's conceivable that we lock one of them up at a relatively bargain basement price given their high ceilings, and then potentially have some money left that we could use to add a Valadez or a Areola, or if we move back to the pitchers, a reliever like Centeno into the mix. If Mercado's still on the market, he's not even necessarily ruled out if we sign Anguino. I'm going to be more aggressive with Anguino, though. He's looking for $2.2 million, and we are going to offer him 2.6. Oh, if I could do that properly. 2.65 million, so a little more than 20% over what he's looking for. The hope is that at the very least we get Anguino and his potentially ridiculous bat locked up. And then we'll take a flyer on Esparza also. We're not going to overbid for him much at all, but there is always a chance if you make a strong early offer to somebody that they just sign with you instead of anybody else. Only 3.05 million left for Esparza. We're going to throw the offer out to him as well. I tend to think we got a pretty good shot at getting Anguino signed to this offer. Esparza, unlikely, only being 50,000 above what he's looking for, given that he's got the highest demand out of everybody out there, and he's certainly one of the most talented players of everyone out there. But it's a bit of a Hail Mary. It's a low probability situation here that they're both going to sign with us for exactly what those first offers are. But there is a non-zero, albeit not high, probability that we come out of this IAFA period with the 2 best position players by doing what we've done. If we sign Anguino, and Esparza says he wants more, we've gotten arguably the best player, and we've still got over $3 million left to do something else. And if we sign Esparza and Anguino comes back and says he wants more, we've gotten arguably the first by some people, but I think even in a worst case scenario, the second best player in the pool. And we still have got $2.65 million left to supplement things. Sounds like Esparza favors our offer, waiting to hear from Mr. Anguino. And there is some admittedly low probability that they just both sign with us for these amounts, and we end up with a absolutely epic class. Not expecting that to happen, but if you don't try, you got no shot. And unfortunately, Anguino has already come back to us and says that he wants more money. Not a surprise, although a little bit surprising with a $2.2 million demand. That, and we offered him $2.65 million. And just a couple days later, he's already coming back and saying, no, that's nowhere near good enough. So at this point, we'll find out what happens with Esparza. Hopefully, we'll either lock him up, or if he comes back and says he wants more money, hopefully Anguino will still be on the market. And then perhaps we pivot to a situation where we can only go after one of the big two. A little surprised that at a bid 20% over his asking price right out of the gates that Anguino kind of turned us down that quickly, but clearly there's other teams that have offered him even more money. And Esparza has now come back and said he wants more money too. So the dream of getting the two top players, which was, as I said, not zero probability, but close to a dream, is clearly over. Esparza at this point says that he's looking for $3.6 million for a little flying dagger, whereas Arturo and Guino looking for $4.32 million. So clearly only going to be able to sign one of those guys at best. And as I mentioned in the last episode, I really like Esparza. I tend to like players with no real weaknesses in their game. Now, admittedly, even in the case of Esparza, you could say that his lack of good base running instincts and his inability to bunt well are holes in his game. But his bat is incredibly well balanced, and we think his glove could be very good as well. And Guino, a little different, plays less important positions as a corner outfielder, and he's not as good potentially at those positions as Esparza would be as a second baseman or a shortstop or a third baseman. They both have good personalities, and Guino certainly much speedier and better base running instincts. And Guino, better contact and a bit better eye, similar gap power, but Anguino with potentially materially less home run power than Esparza if they both fully develop. I really like them both. I think I'm going to go with the Worldwide Scouting Department's preference on this one, though. Anguino says he's looking for $4.32 million. We're going to just try to get this done now, offer him $4.5 million, and hope that we still have $1.2 million left at the end. If we have to go up to $5.7, every penny we have to get him signed, we will. But hopefully coming in a bit higher than he's looking for may get him locked up for us now. And unfortunately, the bidding war for Mr. Anguino continues. Says he's looking for $4.62 million now. And now the Mariners have made him a big offer, and he's looking for $5.5 million. So if we want to bring him on board. We're kind of getting to the point where probably just need to offer him everything that we can. Esparza says he's looking for less money, but honestly, even at $3.6 million, that's going to rule out for us most of the other big-time players we might be interested in. You can see that the guy who was looking for $180,000 is already signed. Arriola only went for $108,000, so certainly was an argument to be in early on him. But honestly, given the fact that we may have to spend every penny that we have to secure Anguino, Arriola is certainly good value, but his ceiling not as high as Anguino. And in this IAFA period, I tend to go for quality more than quantity, at least at the top end of the market. I am just going to offer him the full 5.7 that we can. 5.5 would, in theory, leave us a couple $100,000 left to sign an additional prospect or two. Maybe. My hunch is if we offered him 5.5 and someone else went higher, we'd get a last chance to match. And typically, if you get the last chance to max and you match and you max things out, my experience as the human player is that you typically end up getting the IAFA prospect. But in this situation where Anguino is clearly the top guy and best case scenario is we'd have a couple $100,000 left, I'm just going to offer him everything we have right now. And if he comes back and says that doesn't get the job done because he signs with someone else for the max, which I'm not anticipating, but if he does say that, at least we've got all of our money available, and we hopefully find out relatively quickly if that's the case, and we can move on to option 1A, 1B, 2, 3, 7, 23, depending on how long we need to wait for that answer from Rumor Mill Anguino. And it's been a bit of a wait for us here with Mr. Anguino. He says he favors our offer, but he hasn't signed yet. And unfortunately, Andres Esparza has signed with the Tampa Bay Rays. He ended up going for every penny of the $5.7 million as well. So it was clearly a dream and a hope trade to think we might be able to pair Anguino and Esparza. But as long as we ultimately end up with Esparza when this is all said and done, or Anguino when this is all said and done, Esparza is off the market, along with some other big-time players in Cuellar and Vargas. And Ciso got $2.7 million. As long as we come out of it with Anguino, we'll be content. Valadez is still on the market as well, but hopefully we don't have to go to a plan B at this point. And a very busy day in the history of this Oakland Athletics organization. Mendoza is gone. Fan interest almost crashed. Get a supplemental first-round pick for him, so he obviously signed a pretty big contract. Preseason beginning today, and we did get Anguino inked. So we've got the guy that both we and the worldwide scouting department in aggregate felt was the top prospect available in this year's IAFA class signed. Had to use every penny of our $5.7 million to get it done. But very good speed, great personality, and a potentially outstanding left-handed bat if everything works out. So really happy to be bringing Anguino into our complex. Massive hit to fan interest, though, of 9 points from the departure of Mendoza. That definitely hurts, when we win a World Series title. We've gotten a 10-point boost. So even though we have a catcher who is younger, just as good defensively, and almost inarguably a better hitter than Mendoza waiting to take over his spot in our lineup, the fans are still not pleased that we moved on from Mendoza. And this drop in fan interest, which was up over 100 at points last offseason, down to 76, even though we're coming off of a 108-win season, is a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is. So with Mendoza gone and our work for this IAFA period done with the departure of Anguino, probably going to be a relatively quiet preseason for us between now and spring training starting in about a month. Take a quick look in at our development lab, and still not having the most successful period. Jesus Aguilar, the young center fielder, on track with his program to generate a little more home run power. Lippy Aguayo, secondary pitch improvement. Roque de la Paz, improving his control potentially. And then some better results with some of the younger players in the organization, with Valeriel maybe able to add another pitch, Palomares working on his contact, Godina excelling with his two-strike approach, Scherer improving potentially his pitch movement, and Joe Heilman on track with strength and conditioning. Rat Keach and the new addition Jim West both look potentially successful with their programs as well. But a lot of frustration also among the Oakland Athletics. But fortunately, as we close in on the last 4 or 5 weeks of these programs, there's nobody that's currently struggling, which is when you get the potential to actually have players go in the wrong direction. So at the very least, if we can avoid any poor results this player development lab period, we at least won't be losing any ground. And we've made it to the start of spring training, ranked 9th overall in terms of our minor league system, so slipping back a little bit as we've promoted a fair amount of players in recent years. The development lab actually trending in a less positive direction. Aguilar is now frustrated with his program, so a lot of frustrated guys. Popeye Ibarra is now struggling with his velocity program, so that's definitely not what we want to see there. Hopefully we'll end up with a success rate of at least around 50%, but it's going to take a little bit of luck this final day to get to that point. Right now it looks like there are 9 programs that look like they will be on track or excelling, 8 of them on track and only 1 excelling, to go with 10 frustrated programs and the 1 struggling program. So if we're able to switch Ibarra from struggling to frustrated over the last day and get one of those 10 frustrated programs to be on track, unfortunately I'd have to view that as a small victory at this point. And unfortunately, simmed forward a day, we lost on opening day 1-0 to the Twins. That's fine. Who really cares about performance as long as we're staying healthy and shaking off the rust from the winter during spring training. But no big improvements. We ended up with 10 no improvements in the 1 poor program. So Richards, nothing as far as strength and conditioning. Arriola, unsuccessful with his endurance. Aguilar, no improvement, bat speed. Swenson, no improvement, bat speed. Pimentel, no improvement, plate discipline. Bobby Armstrong, no improvement, gap power. Blumenshine, no improvement, strength and conditioning. Dave Baumler, no improvement, secondary pitch improvement program. Jim West, no improvement with his quality of contact for the young prospect we picked up from the Yankees. Mike Homer, no improvement with his bat speed. And David Ibarra, unfortunately, did have that poor increased velocity program. And his current control and his current movement both dropped. So that's pretty frustrating for the number 86 prospect in baseball, and a guy that we are hoping will be a very important reliever for us in the future. Do have some successful programs, though. Eric Keach, with his endurance program, improved his stamina by 5. That should be a nice step in the right direction for the young reliever, hopefully being able to pitch a few more innings for us after being an all-star as a rookie. Joe Heilman, successful in his strength and conditioning program, although nothing optically that we can tell. Jonathan Shearer increased his pitch movement, so that's positive. Luis Godina, outstanding result with his two-strike approach. Potential avoid strikeouts and current avoid strikeouts both improved a little bit. David Palomares, quality of contact better, his BABIP improving. Luis Villarreal, the young pitcher, successful, adding a slider into his arsenal. He's the pitcher that we picked up last year in the big trade where we sent both Gallic and Blanco to the Padres, and Villarreal potentially adding in a fourth pitch definitely should enhance his chances of becoming a impact starter for us in the not too distant future. Now listed as the number 17 prospect in baseball, best prospect in our organization. Roque de la Paz, the young left-hander, proved his control a little bit. Jacoby Manelli, plate discipline program successful, current eye with a little bit of an improvement there. And last but not least, Luis Aguayo, successful, improving his slider about 5 points and his potential slider a bit. So only, unfortunately, when all was said and done, 9 overall successful programs for us. And that includes the 1 outstanding result, so 1 poor result and 10 no improvement. So definitely not the most fruitful period for us, and always a bummer when you get that poor result and someone actually goes backwards, especially a 22-year-old who we have very high hopes for. So can't say it was a vintage year in the development lab for our Oakland A's here in 2042. That being said, still an important episode for us, I think, in that we did land a guy in Arturo Anguino who we think could be a potentially outstanding hitter for us in the next 5 to 10 years, hopefully. And we'll find out how spring training goes. We'll find out how the shorter trips through the development lab go. And we'll find out which 26 players will be making the 26-man Major League roster of the Oakland A's for this 2042 season in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.